Hi, we're going to talk about healing from trauma. And what I just want to say to other people is, please excuse the mess. And the reason is because there might be people around you who don't understand. But the fact of the matter is, almost everybody has experienced some level of trauma. When I work with the people that I work with as a volunteer here online for trauma recovery groups, I always say, you know, for some people, they're adamant sports writers or sport readers or sport advocates of some kind, and the newspaper didn't show up, and that was the trauma for that day. They wanted to know what happened the night before. They didn't know because they didn't have the internet or whatever. I mean, it could have been years ago. For other people, grandma died, and it wasn't expected, or your spouse or your partner died. For other people, it's a car wreck. For other people, a tornado hit their house. Or rape, or murder, or death, or loss of job, or your house was hit by, like I said, by a flood, or washed away as an island. Who knows? Trauma affects all of us. And it affects each of us a little differently. But like all grief, it has to be honored, respected, and given time. It's just the way it is. It's the only way it works. And the only way it really works well is to be around other people who have also experienced trauma. Now, one of the things I work with is called co-occurring disorders. I work with people who have had, could be time in jail. Maybe they have a drug problem. Maybe they have an alcohol problem. Maybe they're overeater, gambler, smoker, smoking cigarettes, smoking weed. Maybe they're LGBTQ and they've been treated horribly by whoever. Maybe they've been homeless. There's just no question about the incredible variety of ways that we can have trauma in our lives. A stillborn child, a brother who you see killed in front of you by the Holocaust, whoever, whatever, there is always something going on. And right now, just knowing, for me personally, that 180 people have been killed in Iran is trauma. It depends on you. It doesn't depend on anybody else. It depends on you. How you see what's going on in your life and how that affects you. And you don't have to answer to anybody else. I mean, that's the truth. You do not have to answer to anyone else. If it feels like trauma to you, it's trauma. If it feels like something that you need to take time to grieve over, it's trauma. Losing your cat, losing a dog. I lost one a year ago, and I fell on that dog and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed, and I still go out to the grave without one iota of shame and cry. Because to me, that's what that dog meant. Because trauma is an individual thing, and we can have it in any way we want it. And others need to step back and let us deal with it however we wish, whether it's with them next to us holding our hand or a mile away leaving us alone. Everybody gets to pick exactly how they want to deal with it. Now, with the groups I hold online, we've discovered that in sharing, these are people who want to share, who sharing helps. Now, you don't have to jump in and with your name and your face and all that. No, we have it so you can come in with your camera off, and you can call yourself Periwinkle if you want to. It doesn't matter. So far, I haven't had what they call, I think it's a blot. In other words, it's some kind of an AI that's come in, but I haven't had that. I may someday, but at this point, any meeting that I have, you don't have to turn your camera on. You don't have to give me your name. You don't have to speak. If you just want to come in and listen and try to find out, it's like putting your toe in the water. Is this going to help me, or is this going to make it worse? Hard questions, especially when people are facing things like having tried to take their lives that day, having seen their mother die that day, having lost a close friend recently, a car wreck, having lost their job, their home, their marriage, their child, whatever it might be. And so much of the time, and this is what's really, really, really important, nobody else can tell you how you will deal with each trauma, because you can't even tell yourself. And that's the truth. You may absolutely explode and bonk somebody in the head who comes and says something that you feel is inappropriate to you at the time you're dealing with trauma. And you may be somebody who's an absolute pacifist who's never done anything like that before in your life. And you got to forgive yourself. Yeah, I mean that. Because we can't know. We can't say, I never, I wouldn't, I shouldn't, that's not me. You can't do that. It won't work. One way or another, you're going to find out it will not work, because you absolutely cannot know ahead of time the level of deep grief, deep pain, deep anxiety, to the point that you can't even begin, maybe you can't even breathe. Maybe you feel like there's an elephant on your chest. Maybe you feel like somebody just stabbed you through the heart. Maybe you're so sick that you can't stop throwing up or crying or sobbing. You just can't know ahead of time. You just can't know. You know why? Because you're human. You're human. Now, my dog has emotions. There is no question about it. And that dog can tell when I am emotionally upset. Boy, that dog can tell right away. But does that dog have the wide expression of emotions that I have? Probably not. I'd have to check with an expert to ask for sure, but I don't think so. I don't think so, because I think that humans, I mean, like right now, he's ignored, so he's digging a hole in the ground. I'll show you. You'll be able to see that. See, he's digging a hole in the ground right there. See? But I don't know, but perhaps that is a significant, and I don't know. I'm not a dog expert. I'm just a person who's absolutely crazy about dogs. But I don't know anything other I can tell you other than the fact that my experience in 79 years of living on this planet and working with lots and lots of different special education students, kids with autism, blindness, deafness, Down syndrome, learning disabilities, emotional behavioral disorders, operational defiance disorders, authoritarian issues, wide ranges of problems, and being Spanish speakers. My kids I only had one student in all the years I taught who didn't speak Spanish. All my kids were Spanish speakers. So they were dealing with that too, with the bias and the prejudice and the economic challenges they were facing living in poor homes, trailers, shelters on the border of either in Mexico or the border of Arizona and Mexico. Most of the kids. I also taught in Tucson. But the point is, they don't know either. They don't know because we humans can't really know. I mean, how many times have you ever been in a situation where somebody said something and they did something and all of a sudden you're covered in goosebumps? Could you make yourself be covered in goosebumps? I sort of doubt it because it's an emotional response. And can you stop yourself from crying? It's pretty tough. Depends on how it affects you. And you can't really know. Can you honestly say, I would never hit a human being, another person? Are you kidding me? Hard to say. Hard to say. You just can't tell how you might respond. But what we do know is that you can heal. We know for sure you can heal. That doesn't mean you'll never remember it. That doesn't mean it'll never stop, it'll always stop hurting. No. It just means you'll be able to heal. You'll be able to get to a point where you'll be able to say something like, 42 years ago, my grandmother died, and I'll never forget her last words. They impressed me so much. I felt so deeply moved knowing how much she felt about me and what it meant to me. And I realized the other day that I was only either 18 or 19 when I lost my uncle, and I can still cry as I say his name, because he was like a brother. And why? After all those years? Because it still hurts. Not that it's ever going to go away, but I can talk to you about it now. I was totally and completely devastated as a youngster. And now I can justify it too. I've learned to find ways. My uncle was an atomic cloud tester. And when I was a kid, and I was in high school, and he was working in that field, I used to say that he'd open the window of his airplane, take the test tube and stick it outside, fill it up with the atomic dust, put a cork in it, close the window, and put it on the side to take back to the air base. That was my joke. Now, what did I put together later in life? When I got to a point and to a level of maturity, where I could really absorb the sense of the fact that he'd done that kind of work. He'd gone to Vietnam. He'd been in battle. He'd come back with very severe PTSD. He was in a lot of emotional pain. He was a kind man, and even though he was superior to another person, he agreed to take that person's plane up because they had a cold. And he took the plane up, and as he went into an angle of bank, the wing snapped off, and he was only 500 feet over the ground, so he hit the ground and was gone instantly. And how did I process that at 18, 19 years old? Oh, God. Sobbing. How did I process that when I took up flying at age 34 because he died at age 34? And I began to fly, and I began to fly my own plane and go through all of the processes of learning and being up in the air and recognizing that I could perish at any moment if I did something wrong. Experience bad weather and surprises, because sometimes things in the air aren't obvious, and yet they still happen. I went through a lot of things, and then out of nowhere, one day it occurred to me that the man I felt so close to, who was like a brother to me, might have, instead of being a warrior, instead of dying in an airplane, on an air base, in a plane owned by the government, he could have absorbed so much of that atomic energy, atomic dust, atomic whatever the heck it is, into his system, that he could have died a horrid death of something like cancer or some horrid disease that comes from being exposed to atomic dust. And that would have been really hard for him, because he and my dad were very close, because my dad was also military and then both also in the Air Force, and had also he'd been in 2 wars. And so they had a lot to talk about, and they had a lot to be macho about, feel tough about, feel good about themselves. And I remember my father died of cancer. He died of lung cancer because he smoked like a chimney. I mean, he smoked cigarillos like they were cigarettes, and cigarettes like they were, I mean, it was unbelievable. And he died from that. He did that, and he knew he did it. And he knew he was sad, but he did it because he too came back from the Korean War with PTSD. Just as my uncle had come back from the Vietnam War with PTSD. And yet my uncle was spared that. My uncle died on a U.S. Air Force base. So I processed that years later, but I processed it in a way that I can live with now, today. Let me give you another example. I had a real challenge with my mother. She was, my father was usually gone. He was gone in military orders most of my childhood. And I was an only child because my mother was very tall, my father was very short, and they wanted tall sons. They barely knew each other when they married because they wanted tall sons, and they took them over 6 years to have me. And my mother was deeply, deeply disappointed. And then 18 months later, she had a boy who lived only 4 days. And it was because of her blood. And she never, ever, ever forgave me for not being born male. And she beat me, and she was an alcoholic, and she was verbally abusive and physically abusive and sexually abusive. And it was always, he would have done this, Rudy was his name. Rudy would have done this, and you can't, and you're not worth beans, and you can't do anything. You'll never amount to anything. And it went on and on and on and on. And it was awful. I wanted to die. I mean, there was no question about that. I used to hide in the closet a lot just to get away from her. I used to stay at school just to get away from her. Okay, I could grow up into a bitter, horrid person who couldn't trust anybody, right? But instead, I thought a lot about it, and I decided that I needed to have some way that I could process this. And don't ask me. I'm not some, some angel. I don't know why, but I thought about it, and I said, I learned from my step-grandmother, who my mother hated because she was, her mother had walked away from her. And so my mother had lived without a mother. And she had, before my grandfather remarried, she had many years of taking care of her 2 brothers, one older and one younger, and my grandpa. She made meals, breakfast for all 3 of them, and she made the lunches for all 3 of them, and she had to walk through the snow in Montana in a dress because without the heavy stockings because they made them so short that they didn't fit her long legs. She fell out of a jump seat when she was 3 years old and broke her back and her neck and broke off her coccyx, damaged her back and damaged some spaces in her neck and between her shoulder blades. Okay, so she had a lot of issues that she dealt with as a child. And I decided, like myself, she had a really tough childhood. That is really sad. I'm really sorry that she had all those things happen to her. I'm really sorry she didn't have a mother to teach her about mother's love. I'm really sorry that although my step-grandmother tried so hard, and she was the mother of my beloved Uncle Stanley, and I'm sorry that even though my grandfather tried hard, he wasn't able to help her overcome so much of her pain. I'm really sad about that. But the woman who was my mother, I won't forgive. I can't forgive because it was terrifying. I mean, I was just beaten and humiliated and embarrassed and put down and insulted. Her favorite thing to do was insult me in front of the public, in front of people I didn't even know, strangers, and in front of people I didn't know, like my friends. So I've been able to take the two sides of that and balance out my empathy and my disappointment, sadness. And it helps me to better understand that I came out okay. I really did come out okay because I didn't let her way of treating me become how I treated others. And I certainly didn't let myself be that way towards my children. I think about all three of my kids every day, even the oldest one who was taken from me by my parents and despised me for having taken him at age 5.5 to be with me for some years because my mother said she just couldn't take it anymore. Of course, she spoiled him to death and then sent him to me to take care of him. It was tough. It was really tough. It was very, very difficult. But on the other hand, I don't feel bitter about that either. At least I got to know him. I wouldn't have otherwise. Not know him like I did my daughter, for sure. My daughter is my absolute best friend in the whole world. There's nobody that holds a space in my heart like my daughter. Because she had a heart attack at 4.5 months and her stomach valve didn't work. And they told me the day she was born she'd never make it, but she did. And now she's the president of a college. And I couldn't be more proud of her. No matter what she does or thinks, I couldn't be any more proud of her. Even though some of her ideas don't mash with mine, that's okay. And that's what I learned in processing my trauma. And isn't that a great thing? To find things in your life that are so traumatic that they make you act in a way you don't want to act and feel in a way you don't want to feel and just be overwhelmed with the shock at how you feel or how you don't feel or how you cry or you don't cry or whatever it is. And yet, you'd be able to sit back and say, oh, I got through that. You know what? The one thing in life I can count on is change. It's the only thing I can count on in life. Things will change. Situations will change. My life will change. But I got through those things. I bet you I bet you I can get through more. And that is a real aha when you realize, I can do this. I can get through this. And if you feel at any point that you can't, get help. Get help. And don't tell me you can't afford it. Because the fact of the matter is there are all kinds of free things online right now, because I know I'm a volunteer in one of those. Actually, I've volunteered in several. But there are online programs, and you don't have to say who you are or show your face in most of them. So don't be afraid. Don't hold yourself back. Don't crawl into a hole. Don't blow your brains out. Recognize you got through something, because I know there was something that went wrong at some point in your life. Somebody was a bully. Somebody picked on you. Somebody called you names. Somebody made fun of the color socks you wore to school or the way you combed your hair. Something. And you got through it. And you'll get through it again if you're not afraid to ask for help. I wouldn't be a volunteer if I didn't believe that. If I didn't believe that every single time I turn on the internet to go into a meeting, that I'm going to learn something and other people are going to learn something. I'm going to give and receive love, kindness, understanding. Everybody has to go in already agreeing, non-judgmental. If that doesn't happen, then things can go absolutely to pot. But if you can all agree, you will not be a judgmental. You will not criticize people in any way. In fact, the best thing you can do is just listen. Now, if they ask you for advice or feedback of any kind, that's a different story. But there's always somebody you can talk to who's been there, done that, and gotten over it. And then you can do it too. Maybe not alone. That's why other people are there. Other people want to help you. But you can also get through it. Got a question? Ask me. Want to meet me on Zoom? Let me know. I'll be happy to do that. I run a nonprofit. I have for 34 years. If you go down into the description, you'll see it. If you would like to stop by, two of us are artists. We both make things to remind you about taking care of the earth. You might stop and look at them. Maybe one of them will interest you. But I really want to thank you for being here today, and good luck with your trauma. A lot of us are out here willing to help. Thanks for being here.